If you haven't seen my previous video about Epson scan software, this video will be a continuation of my scanning process that I show in that video. So if you're following along, I'll assume you have a color negative scanned in ICM mode with an unclamped input and output, and a black and white negative scanned with no color correction. If none of that makes sense, go and watch the other video. Seriously, you need to know about this, and while you're at it, go watch my guide on how to get the best scans on your flatbed scanner. But you don't have to be using a flatbed or Epson scan software for this video to be helpful, because I'm going to cover quite a lot about negative inversion software and photo editing techniques that should be applicable to any setup. I'm going to start with inverting my color negatives, since working with color is far more complex than working with black and white. There are many ways of inverting a negative. You can do it yourself, which I'll demonstrate later, or you could use a Photoshop/Lightroom plugin, and there's even dedicated software. Every single way of inverting a negative does give you different results, and it's all part of the artistic process. Once your negative has been scanned, everything beyond that is mostly up to your personal interpretation. There isn't one perfect solution for every single photo. So for inversion software, here's some free options to consider. Raw Therapy is a piece of software which is extremely powerful. I think it's intended to be a Lightroom replacement, and it has a film negative tool built in, though this software is more focused on raw files from digital cameras and not from a flatbed scan like what I'm working with here, but you can certainly use it for anything. The problem with this software is that it is too complicated, and like all open source software, the UI is not the most intuitive. I've tried it and I was unhappy with the results, but I'm sure if I dedicated years and years to learning the software, it might be the best thing ever made. The next option is Grain to Pixel, which is a free Photoshop plugin for inverting negatives. It's pretty easy to use and has good batch processing, but it does have some strange flaws. This one also is more geared towards inverting raw files from digital camera scanning, though it certainly can do scans from a flatbed. This tool also has a cool feature that lets you build a lens correction profile to remove any vignetting caused by a camera lens. Very cool, but for my use case, not needed. If you're a crazy person and you want to use image magic and command line to do everything, well, there's the poorly named C41-lab script for that. Or there was, I had to hunt this thing down on the archive. It probably gives good results, maybe. Finally, of course, you can do the inversion yourself for free. As for paid software, there is of course Negative Lab Pro, which is a Lightroom plugin, and it does a very good job. There's a reason why so many people recommend this software, but it costs 100 smackers. I'll probably end up buying the new 3.0 version when that comes out, but hey, if Nate wants to send me a young reviewer copy, I'll gladly accept. I'm using an unupdated trial version I downloaded years ago. Next, there's a Photoshop plugin called Color Perfect, which has a negative inverter built in. I have no experience with it, but it sounds very promising. This one costs $67. Here's another Photoshop plugin, Negmaster. This one cost almost $90 US, but it looks pretty cool. Again, no experience with it, but it says it does slide film too, so that's kind of interesting. And last, there is the also very poorly named Film Lab, a standalone piece of software that has a subscription fee, but it does let you buy a lifetime copy for $200. So that's nice. Hopefully they don't break that contract in a few years like so many companies are trying to do these days. Anyway, I tried the trial for this one, and it seemed to work okay, but I had to tweak the settings manually, and there were hardly any settings. I guess if you don't have Lightroom or Photoshop, it might be viable, but I see no reason why you would use this over Grain to Pixel or Negative Lab Pro. Also, why would they name it Film Lab? It's just like that C41 Lab script. No one is ever going to be able to find it. It's like naming your program Photo. What are people going to search for? Photo software? Photo program? They ain't finding it. You need a cool name like Negmaster, not something that can't even be trademarked. So I'm going to show you my results from Negative Lab Pro, Grain to Pixel, and manually inverting, since those I feel give me the best results of the methods I've tried. If you're working with raw files from a digital camera, I suggest using a custom linear profile for your camera to get the most dynamic range and apply lens corrections to the initial raw capture first before bringing it into any inversion software, which may cause you to lose that information. I think Negative Lab Pro shouldn't have this issue, but other software probably does. I'm using a flatbed, so I don't have to worry about this. I mentioned in the previous video that I do not use TIFF processing for Negative Lab Pro, as I found it makes minimal difference even when using different gamma settings. One important thing to remember when using Negative Lab Pro is that your scan needs some of the film border to work, but it doesn't like it when you have the film sprocket holes. Luckily in Lightroom, you can simply crop those out, and later, after the negative has been inverted, you can reset the crop to get your original image. When inverting the ICM scan mode images, I like to have my pre-saturation settings on very low. Then I just press convert and boom, it does a pretty amazing job. I typically like to set my tones to linear, and I'll usually keep my color on neutral, but sometimes I'll change it to warming or cooling depending on the image. For sharpening, I keep it on default, which on my version of Negative Lab Pro and on my flatbed scans simply disables any sharpening. I'll sharpen the image later on manually. This will probably be different for a camera scanned RAW file though. I think I'm going to start using Negative Lab Pro for all of my color negatives since I feel like it usually gives me a very good result. However, I've had images where my manual inversion method ends up giving me better results too, so it isn't always a perfect solution. Now on to grain to pixel. This software is more advanced when it comes to file processing things, but it isn't nearly as advanced when it comes to the inversions compared to Negative Lab Pro. In fact, grain to pixel gives you basically no control over the inversion, but you can apply custom actions on each image automatically after it's been inverted, so that's kind of cool. In grain to pixel, I'll be in linear TIFF mode. It's pretty vague as to what kind of format it actually wants, which is why I kind of think I get weird results from the Epson oversaturated ICM mode scans. Now I'll select the scans I want to invert and press run. It's first going to ask me to select an area that contains the film base. Now, you may be able to see in the video that the film here does not have a uniform color across the frame. This is probably some kind of developing issue, but it's on the actual film. So I'm going to have to select an area that I think is the most even. Now, I don't know if every pixel in this circle is getting sampled, or if it's just the one pixel in the center. So I like to always scale the target down so it's only within the area of the film base. Press enter and it's going to ask you if you want to use this same sample for the rest of the selected images. This is up to you, but right now I'm doing conversions of files that were scanned with different settings, so I'll select no. I'll set the sample point for my next image, and it's done. Here's the ICM mode image compared with the no color correction mode image. You can see grain to pixel did a much better job with the no color correction mode image than it did with the ICM mode image. However, I could lower the saturation of the ICM inversion, and now they're very similar. And check this out, this is the scan I got from the lab that developed these, but this time I'll compare it to my final edit of the Negative Lab Pro inversion. Now I'll show you some ways you can manually invert scans. You've got 3 ways of inverting the negative yourself. First off, you have the lazy method. Take your scan, press Ctrl-I to invert it. Ideally, you want to crop your image not to have any of the film border. Now with your photo inverted, go to Image, Autotone, and wow, that did a pretty good job, surprisingly. Let's try it on this image. Invert, Autotone. And this one is okay, but it's a little too green. Let me undo that, and instead I'll auto color and then auto tone it. Now that's much better. You can get the same results just by adding a curves adjustment layer. Alt-click on the big auto button, or click this tiny little menu button on the top right of the panel and select Auto Options. Then just select Enhance Per Channel Contrast and enable Snap Neutral Midtones if you need it. Using a curves layer gives you a chance to fine-tune the auto adjustments if you don't like them. This method is far from perfect though, and I would recommend not relying on it. It doesn't work for every photo either. Some just completely fail. See this Coke image? Now I can fix this by using the curves auto mode and setting my shadow clip percent to something very high, or I could just crop the image, which fixes the problem completely. Still, I wouldn't recommend this method at all, though it might be a route you could take if you're simply trying to get something out of some scans you don't really care about, like old disposable camera family vacation photos. Now on to the truly manual methods. There's Alex Burke's method, which he has 2 excellent in-depth videos for his process, and I'll have those linked in the description. His method involves setting a black point by sampling then subtracting the color of the film base, and then manually setting the highlights for each channel. Of course, he goes and does a lot of other adjustments after that, so I would recommend watching his videos, but the issue with his method is that I've noticed, for me at least, it seems to create a lot of color noise in shadow areas. I think this is because subtracting just a single color from the image isn't fully removing the whole tonal range of the film base, especially for film that's old as hell like mine was, or under/overexposed. So let me show you my method for manually inverting. Obviously I start with a simple direct invert, and now I add a curves layer, and I start clipping my black points for each channel, holding down Alt to preview. You should ignore the film borders here, and you don't want to actually clip anything in your real image, unless it's somehow 100% black. After I do this for each channel, I'll now do the same thing, but for the highlights. This is a little more tricky because some photos you may want certain things to be slightly clipping, usually really bright lights or reflections. You're gonna have to just get a feel for what's good. Just make sure you don't have the whites clipped in other parts of the photo. And remember, if you don't clip it now, you can always selectively brighten those lights later on for the same effect. So I have a pretty good result already, but I'll add another curves layer and I'll start toning down various color casts that I can see. You could first add a saturation layer below this one if you want to help visualize the color imbalance. Clearly the image is too green, so I'll remove a little bit of green. I'm going to bump up the reds just a tiny little bit, but I'll also reduce the reds in the shadows. I'll do the same for the blues, but I'll pull down the midtones a little tiny bit, and maybe boost the highlights. It's starting to look pretty good now. I'm going to add some brightness and contrast using another curves layer. I'll bring in my highlights and shadows, and I'll add in the slightest little S-curve too. Great, now it looks like an actual photo. But there's still tons of tiny tweaks you could keep making to it. You could be using luminosity masks and all kinds of crazy stuff to make your image exactly into whatever you want. But right now it's time to move on to inverting black and white negatives. This is extremely easy, and personally I don't use any other software for black and white. I manually invert every single one of my black and white images. I'm sure Negative Lab Pro and Grain to Pixel does a great job, but for my black and white workflow, I actually want my inversion to still contain as much dynamic range as possible. So I start with the scan, do a basic invert, then add a curves layer. I clamp my shadows so they're just about to clip but aren't clipping, and then I clamp my highlights the same way. You could of course use the auto mode or even the eyedroppers here, but I find I still get better results doing it myself. That's it. It only takes a few seconds for each image. I'll then go and process it creatively, doing my sharpening and all of my adjustments, mostly using camera raw, and maybe I'll use luminosity masks for some extreme edits. Now I'll go back to this color image and I can start talking about sharpening. Disclaimer, I'm not the greatest image processor in the world. I'm sure there are plenty of people with far better ways of sharpening their photos than me. Sharpening is an unbelievably broad and complex topic. There are so many ways to sharpen an image, and even different ways within those ways. I could have a completely horrid method, and a lot of this is up to personal taste. The current widely accepted sharpening workflow involves sharpening photos in 3 stages. Input or capture sharpening, this is the most important one. Then there's creative sharpening, this would be something like unsharp mask or high pass sharpening. And finally there's output sharpening, which is usually applied when you're downscaling an image. So I'll start with showing you a few different ways I do input sharpening. I personally prefer using deconvolution sharpening for my initial sharpening, unlike unsharp mask, which simply uses a high-pass technique to create contrast around edges, which gives your brain the illusion of perceived sharpness. Deconvolution sharpening actually reconstructs details that were seemingly lost due to optical imperfections with the camera and lens setup. Now, I don't actually know if my 2 methods using Camera Raw or Photoshop are actually truly deconvolution. That raw therapy software does let you select a deconvolution sharpening algorithm, but real deconvolution is usually done by creating custom point spread functions for your camera and using some crazy image processing software like ImageJ. This stuff is mostly used by people doing astrophotography and cellular or medical imagery. Here's an example of the absolute insanity you can perform using a custom point spread function. I'll have this linked below. Here's the image the guy captured. And this is that same image after using real deconvolution with a profiled point spread function. It was able to reconstruct all of that from what most people would consider blur. Yes, I could do this kind of thing on my scanner and my camera to get the sharpest possible images, but ain't nobody got time for that. And I get decent results with my easy methods. I'll first show you the way I usually do it. I take my image and bring it into Adobe Camera Raw, and under the Detail panel, I enable Sharpening. Oh, and I almost never do any kind of noise reduction on film photos. Maybe some in localized areas, but it's usually very minor. Color noise maybe if I'm dealing with some weird exposure issues, but usually not. So I like to put the Sharpening slider up pretty high initially just so I can visualize my changes. Now here's the important trick. Put the detail slider all the way up. I've seen people claim that this enables a non-high pass based deconvolution algorithm, but I don't know if that's actually true. I do know it gives similar results to lens blur removal, which is what I want. It's essentially deconvoluting the blur of the lens. If you were using a camera scan, you would probably want to keep your radius as low as possible, probably on the lowest or maybe at 1 max. But because this is a 4800 DPI flatbed scan, where my actual finest details are at a resolution far less than that DPI, I need to increase my radius all the way up to somewhere around 2.5 or 3. I'm going to turn my sharpening down a bit. For typical camera photos, I usually never go above 40, but for the flatbed, I like to crank it up a little bit more. 60 or 70 seems like a pretty good maximum. I'll apply some masking, but I don't always rely on that. If this was an image with a lot of sky, I would use masks to blend this sharpened image with the original unsharpened one. You typically don't want to sharpen areas of dark shadows, bright lights, or solid colors like the clear sky. This camera raw method doesn't differentiate though, so you have to do extra work. There is the alternative method though, using Photoshop's Smart Sharpen. So with Smart Sharpen, you want to be on lens blur mode. 2.8 looks pretty good for the radius, but again, this is determined by the size of the details in your image. Sometimes I feel like I get better results here by enabling legacy mode and more accurate mode, but after further testing, I can't actually see any difference between having those enabled or disabled. Remember, this initial input sharpening is meant to be subtle. All you want to do is bring back the detail that was captured but lost by flaws in the optics. You also don't want to induce extra noise. It may look like you're bringing in more detail, but noise will trick your brain into thinking there's detail where there isn't. The cool part about Smart Sharpen is that there's these masking options. You can actually remove the sharpening from areas of shadow and highlights by playing with these controls. You might not be able to see it in the video, but just a few percent of fade here has completely removed the sharpening along the shadowed part of the tree. For highlights, I'll set it a little higher at 20%. So I'll hit accept, and if I compare this to the unsharpened version, you'll see minimal difference when zoomed out. But zoomed in at 100%, you can tell there's quite a lot more detail. Compared to the scans using Epson's unsharp mask though, you can see we still have a little bit more work to do. This is where the creative phase of sharpening comes in. It's probably a good idea to edit your image a bit first before doing any creative sharpening, since this kind of sharpening could be affected by significant edits to exposure or highlights. I'm normally pretty subtle with creative sharpening as well, if I even use it at all. That Epson image I keep showing is way over sharpened, so I'll try to match it, but you would never want to sharpen an image like that for real. The method you use really depends on what you're trying to do and what kind of image you're sharpening. For an image with a lot of sky, you may find manually overlaying a high pass onto the image works the best. Or you could just use Smart Sharpen but set it to Gaussian this time. For this image, I'm going to just use Photoshop's Unsharp Mask filter. This is actually the image I used the camera raw sharpening on because I personally like the final results better. I don't typically use Smart Sharpen at all. So Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask, I like to turn off the threshold. And here the settings again are really specific to your image and your scan. Remember, this is creative sharpening. It's no longer bringing back lost detail, it's just artificially exaggerating details that exist by boosting the contrast around edges. You want the radius to be just enough to not cause haloing on your finest details. I'd normally lower the sharpening amount to something more reasonable like 75%, but I'm going to keep it pretty high for the video. If I compare this to the image that only had input sharpening done on it, you can see a big difference. Then compared to Epson Scan's Unsharp Mask, they look almost identical, but when I zoom in and compare these, you'll see mine is clearly better than the Epson Scan sharpened image. You can really see it in this leafy area with a lot of contrast. The Epson sharpening has created these blobs of color on the stick and on the leaves, but here's mine, and you can see this little stick is nice and smooth, while also being ever so slightly less blurry. So that's my final image, and now I'm ready to share it with the world. But it's some absurdly high resolution, so I need to make it smaller. Obviously I keep everything full res on my end, but when I upload it to Instagram or my website, I want to make it smaller. This is where the final form of sharpening comes into play, output sharpening. This can be pretty straightforward. Go to Image, Image Size, and set it to whatever you want, but for resample, make sure you set it to bicubic sharper. This will apply extra sharpening after the image is resized. If you didn't know, shrinking an image actually makes it softer no matter what, even when you're doing an exact integer nearest neighbor downscale. Nearest neighbor does give you pretty good results if you're doing something at an exact integer, but bicubic sharper really makes a noticeable difference. But really, these methods are still not perfect for output sharpening. Realistically, you should still be selectively sharpening your image, even for the output. You really don't want to apply a global sharpening filter like I do. You want to avoid sharpening your shadows and highlights. You really should resize your photos down, and then apply manual sharpening using Unsharp Mask or Smart Sharpen, just like I showed earlier. Sharpening can get pretty wild. Like I said, you should probably be masking your input and creative sharpening in some way to get the best possible results. Before doing any creative sharpening, I would usually do the bulk of my edits first, mostly in Camera Raw, which pretty much just involves moving the dehaze slider to the right and boosting the blue saturation levels in the calibration window, maybe a few other minor tweaks. But that part of image processing is all completely subjective and up to your artistic intent. And that's pretty much the whole video. Hopefully this will help you get the most out of your negative scans. Even if you aren't using a flatbed scanner like me, you should still get a lot out of this video. Go follow me on Insta if you like my pics, and make sure you subscribe, because you better believe I'm not done making insanely in-depth videos about scanners. I got a few more up my sleeve, so get excited. Yay!